Hey everyone, welcome back to Satanix Reviews. Today we have a very special guest. Since we're going to be reviewing the first ever Ace Attorney game, I've invited the big man himself, Phoenix Wright. Say hello, Phoenix. Wait, you said you'd star in my show to make this Court Chaos crossover. Well, that explains a lot. Well, that was awkward. Now onto the review. Now I know what you're thinking. A video game series where you play as a defense attorney and every game involves investigating crime scenes while you defend your clients in court? Why yes, that does sound like the most boring concept for a video game series, and from Nintendo no less. However, these games are becoming more popular lately, with all the games being either remade or ported. You can consider me one of those fans because I do feel like talking about these games. However, I'm just going to discuss the first game for now. Now, I'm going to review this game differently from the other games I've reviewed. Instead of analyzing the gameplay and graphics, I'll be addressing the characters, story arcs, and overall themes. These games started in the early 2000s on the Game Boy Advance, but they were only released in Japan. The ones that got localized were the DS remakes, which even had an added episode for the one I'll be talking about. Now, what I love about this game is that it's not even meant to be taken seriously. It's a complete and total parody. Sure, it gives people some idea of what court cases are like and how people defend their clients, but that just makes it funnier when you see how over the top it's taken. This game is so overdramatic with its themes and ideas. With that said, however, you don't have to find it funny like I do, because it's still a good story. The game centers around Phoenix Wright, as the title suggests, becoming a lawyer like he always wanted to. His mentor, Mia Fey, helps him with his first case as he has to defend a childhood friend of his, Larry. Admittedly, this case is kind of weak. It gets things going and it has some memorable moments, and it is a good, easy starting point for the franchise. The characters are limited and the killer is pretty boring aside from his breakdown. He had no reason to commit his murder, and the prosecutor, Winston Payne, is just your typical arrogant loser. The second case is where things really get started. The defendant becomes Maya Fey, Mia's sister, who is much more memorable to the point where she becomes one of the main characters. The villains are also a bit more memorable, despite the killer just being a generic asshole. With that said, the prosecutor, Miles Edgeworth, is both charming and a cocky asshole. He and Detective Gumshoe were great off each other, and Miles's cool and calculated demeanor makes him very entertaining to watch. He makes so many of these games work, and he even got his own spin-off franchises, despite it only being two games. This second case is when I knew this game was going to be great. There's so much tension when it comes to trying to expose the true killer, even if it clearly shows who it is during the case's opening. There's no mystery as to who it is, but it's rather the case of why they did it and how they planned this. Unfortunately, it goes back downhill again once it gets to the third case. Once again, Maya and Miles help save it, but just barely, because the other characters are just dull. Unless Maya or Gumshoe are involved, the comedy is just weak on this one. But that said, this started a complete running gag of people debating over calling a ladder a step ladder. I don't know why this became such a major running gag. It seemed like every single game had this debate. I'm completely with Maya on this one. What's the difference? You climb it and it has steps, so I'm with her on this. Other than that, it's pretty weak. I get it that they wanted to make this villain more unassuming, but I feel like the way that Phoenix figures out this case just seems really random and precise. Since when did he suddenly become this big genius, guesstimating all the stuff that led up to the victim's kill? Also, it doesn't feel as big as the previous case. I know not every case needs to be important, but if it's not going to be as funny or as entertaining, it needs to have some substance. It's not a bad case, but it's pretty lackluster in comparison to the second case. Either way, you can guess the pattern by now. Every odd-numbered case is the weaker one, while the even-numbered case is the great one. Well, the fourth case not only surpasses the previous case, but even surpasses the second case. This case is the reason to play the game. Miles becomes the defendant, leaving the prosecution spot to Manfred von Karma. At first I thought this guy was too obvious for a villain, but looking back at him, I realized you're supposed to not only hate him, but despise him. Von Karma is a true bastard with no redemption. He preys upon the weak and demands that his cases take no more than a few minutes. He has all his evidence right away, and his witnesses give foolproof testimonies. And just to add insult to injury, this guy has the balls to scold the defense for asking questions about the testimonies unless he has supporting evidence. Man, what a jerk. I still hate him, but I love hating him. You want this man to suffer for all the people he manipulates and hurts. So, when he finally breaks down and shows his true colors, it's beyond satisfying. But he's just the cherry on top because the rest of the writing is top notch. We not only get insight into Phoenix's backstory, but also Miles's backstory. It shows that Miles truly is a victim himself due to his past haunting him, but it doesn't ruin his character. You want to see his name being cleared because you know how much Phoenix respects him. The comedy is also back on track, but this case does take itself more seriously. This does make it funnier at times, but once again, you can still take it seriously. That's a sign of a great game to me. You can see it from either a comedic side or a dramatic side. This game just has a lot of personality, and it isn't afraid to go really goofy, but it doesn't shy away from showing a lot of intense imagery. The violence is tame but effective. You only see some blood, but when you see it, there's a sense of tension. Now, this concludes all the case from the original GBA version, but there was one more case for the DS version and all the other versions that followed, so this is canon, but I've heard some mixed opinions on this one. You're either going to really love or really not like this case, depending upon your tolerance for the runtime. This has a total of 3 trials, making it by far the longest case in the game. There are some positives to give this case. For one, it does explain a few reasons for the decisions that led to the game's sequel, Justice for All. However, this case feels like it's trying to repeat elements from the previous case, like how it involves yet another case from years ago. The villain is pretty great, but my biggest disappointment is that Maya isn't in this one. The replacement, Emma Skye, isn't a bad character, but Maya had this energy to her comedy that can't be recaptured. Luckily, the other major characters are back, including Miles, and some of the new characters are pretty good. With that said, this is a DS game, so this game implements a lot of microphone and touchscreen mechanics. When I first played this game, I played it on emulator, and it lagged quite a bit. Not to mention, the microphone option didn't even work. So I had to skip this case entirely and move on to the second game. I'm not even sure how they did this part on modern day consoles. I mean, do any modern consoles even have microphones anymore, or something along those lines? Anyway, this case is still pretty entertaining for me. It's not as great as cases 2 and 4, but I still like it thanks to Miles and the killer. So this wraps up the story and characters. There's nothing much else to add other than the iconic soundtrack. Yeah, the pursuit slash corner theme is pretty famous for people who haven't even played the games, but this entire soundtrack has some absolute gems. They range from atmospheric to catchy to calming to beautiful. Capcom really outdid themselves, making the courtroom a fun place. In fact, maybe they did a little too good of a job because my biggest problem with these games is always the investigations. The investigation segments are slow and boring. They have their memorable and funny moments, but only when Maya is around. The trials are where the real fun begins. But maybe you disagree and say that they're both equal, or you think the investigations exceed the quality of the trials. Either way, this game's a lot of fun to try out. It's pretty easy to get into, but you'll have to go in with the expectations of this is a point and click game with visual novel and puzzle solving elements. I don't like point and click games or even puzzle games, so the fact that I'm praising this game so much is a testament to how well it's made. My final verdict of this game is not guilty. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching. Till then, everyone.